राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन 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 जमुना तीर वनचारी जमुना तीर वनचारी जय जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजनवल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपीजनवल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना 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 यमुनातीरवनचारी यमुनातीरवनचारी जय जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। जय ओम विष्णुपद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद शिल अभय चंद्रानंद भक्तिवेदांत श्री रूपाठ की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य शिल ठाकुर हरिदास की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंद राधा कुंद गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। वृंदावन धाम की जय। नवद्वीप मायापुर धाम की जय। गंगा देवी की जय। यमुना मई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी रानी की जय। समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। इस्कॉन बीबीटी संस्थापक आचार्य श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। गौ प्रेमानंदे। All glory to the sum of devotees. All glory to the sum of devotees. All glory to the sum of devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेष्वभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवति उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी। कृष्णे स्वधामो भगते धर्मज्ञानादिभिः सह कलौ नष्टदृशामेष पुराणार्को धुनोदितः। This is Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 1, Text number 51. You don't need a translation, or what's going on? Please repeat. Agnehi yatha daro viyoga yogayoho adrishtataha nirmitam nimittam asti. Okay, sorry. Anyat na nimittam asti evam hi jantoho api durvibhavya sharira sanyoga viyoga hetuh agniryatha daru viyoga yogayor adrishtatonyanna nimittamasti evam hi jantorapi durvibhavya sharira sanyoga viyoga hetuh agniryatha daru viyoga yogayor adrishtatonyanna nimittamasti evam hi jantorapi durvibhavya sharira sanyoga viyoga hetuh agniryatha daru viyoga yogayor adrishtatonyanna nimittamasti evam hi jantorapi durvibhavya sharira sanyoga viyoga hetuh agniryatha daru viyoga yogayor adrishtatonyanna nimittamasti evam hi jantorapi durvibhavya sanyoga viyoga hetuh agniryatha daru viyoga yogayor adrishtatonyanna nimittamasti evam hi jantorapi durvibhavya sharira sanyoga viyoga hetuh agniryatha daru viyoga yogayor Mataji. Agnehe, of a fire in the forest. Yatha, as. Daru, of wood. Viyoga yoga yoho, of both the escaping and the capturing. Adrishtataha, than unseen providence. Anyat, some other reason or accident. Na, not. Nimittam, a cause. Asti, there is. Evam, in this way. He, certainly. Jantoho, of the living being. Api, indeed. Gurvibhavyaha, cannot be found out. Sharira, of the body. Sanyoga, of the accepting. Viyoga, or the giving up. Hetoho, the cause. Translation. When a fire, for some unseen reason, leaps over one piece of wood and sets fire to the next, the reason is destiny. Similarly, when a living being accepts one kind of body and leaves aside another, there is no other reason than unseen destiny. Please repeat. When a fire, for some unseen reason, leaps over one piece of wood and sets fire to the next, the reason is destiny. Similarly, when a living being accepts one kind of body and leaves aside another, there is no other reason than unseen destiny. Report by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder and Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. When there is a fire in a village, the fire sometimes jumps over one house and burns another. Similarly, when there is a forest fire, the fire sometimes jumps over one tree and catches another. Why this happens, no one can say. One may set forth some imaginary reason why the nearest tree or house did not catch fire, whereas a tree or a house in a distant place did, but actually the reason is destiny. This reason also applies to the transmigration of the soul, by which a prime minister in one life may become a dog in the next. The work of unseen destiny cannot be ascertained by practical experimental knowledge, and therefore one must be satisfied by reasoning that everything is done by Supreme Providence. Om Ajnana Timidantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuddhapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Pitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya eva cha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Madhvavi Ravi Gopala Srikuryat Kripaya Yadi Tadaiva Sampayah Pitva Krishye Yustat Priyajanaha Praninama Drishtam Cha Punar Durvitarkimiti Sad Drishtantamaha Agneriti. In this verse, Sridhar Swami explains, he is continuing, Vasudev continues, and he gives an example to illustrate the inconceivable nature of any living entity's unseen destiny. Vane vrikshan pradahan vahni sannihitan api vrikshan parityajya kadachit durasthan api dati. This is the first example that fire leaps over one piece of wood and sets fire to the next without explanation. Or grame grihan va nahiyasya praniya drishta avyatitarekena kinchid niyamakamasmi yatha. Just as there's no cause if one person's house burns down but the next person's house is saved. Evam jantor janma maranayor api hetor yurdibhavyo chintyaha. The reason that we accept one material body and not another material body, or rather one material body instead of another material body, that is inconceivable to us. Durvibhavya here, he glosses, means inconceivable. Ata etad upariyasya adrishtameva hetur iti bhava. The idea is that there's no reason here other than unseen destiny, adrishta. This is a jargon that's used in the Purva Mimamsa school of Vedic philosophy to describe one's fate, karma. You can't see it. You can't understand. To some degree, a devotee can understand things because he's trained as a result of practicing Krishna consciousness. We know from chapter 15 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells us, Yatanto yoginas chainam pashyanti atmani avasthitam, yatanto prakatatmano nainam pashyanti chetasaha. Ityadi. That if someone is practicing Krishna consciousness, his intelligence is sharpened. His knowledge is more than others. And he sees how a living being can transmigrate from one body to another one. But a person who's not practicing Krishna consciousness can't see any of this, even though he tries to see. And generally the process that is being discouraged here in Prabhupada's purport is that we should not be so keen on trying to understand things by practical experimental knowledge or ascertainment basically on the basis of speculation. You never get it. Never ever get it. Krishna says this, chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita also. What's that verse? Grahana karmano gatihi. Huh? Yes, kim karma, kim akarmeti. The idea is this. Yes, karmano bihapi bodhavyam, bodhavyam chavi karmanaha, akarmanashte bodhavyam, gahana karmano. That's it. This, another one is also kim karma, kim akarmeti. Arjuna is not really confused because Krishna has already mentioned these terms in chapter 3. So you can't figure out. We know that there are 3 categories. There's karma, there's vikarma, and there's akarma. But we can't figure out the intricacies of karma. So, but by Krishna consciousness, we can get a better idea. Still, it's always going to be adrishta. Ultimately, we are not going to see everything. That's the sign of a good manager. He keeps everything a little bit. Not everybody needs to know things, because if people know too much, what do? They become mischievous. People who start knowing too much, then they start calculating how can we exploit the situation, then it's just a headache. So he keeps things a little vague, Krishna. So this is it. And this karma is in particular very difficult to understand. Many, many discussions about this here and there throughout the Shrutis and the Smritis as well. There's a lot we can say about that, but it's enough to say that this is why he uses the word here, durvibhavya. You're never going to get it. It's achintya, Sridhar Swami tells us. Jiva Goswami in particular in his commentary on this verse also emphasizes the achintya shakti. As he does in general. In fact, his entire Shat Sandarbha is just an exercise in explaining, first of all, the importance of the Lord's energy, and then secondly, the inconceivable nature of that energy. Cannot understand the external energy, what to speak of the internal energy. It's very, very difficult to understand. Where's that verse? In Vrindavan we pray. Vigdagdha Sindhu. Anuraga Rasaika Sindhur. Vatsalya Sindhur. Ati Sandra Krapaika Sindhur. Lavanya Sindhur. Ati Rupa. Amrita Chari Rupa Sindhu, Sri Radhika Spurdume Vridi Kedi Sindhu. Please reveal me to me, Srimati Radharani, the ocean of your auspicious pastimes. You're an ocean of expertise. You're an ocean of compassion. Everything about you is oceanic. So please reveal this to me. This is the function. This is our purpose in Krishna consciousness. Actually, we're not too concerned about the workings of karma. Krishna has given us everything we need to know about it by explaining these 3 categories, karma, akarma, vikarma. We have to carefully avoid vikarma because it obstructs Krishna consciousness. There's no such thing as vikarma yoga. People try to act as if there was such a thing, but there isn't. You have to be pious. Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punyakarmanam. So these 2 are important to know, and it's important to tasmat shastram pramanam te karya karya vijanataha. To act in terms of the shastric injunction, that is the very definition of what it means to be karmic or dharmic, punya, another synonym. So that's important because it facilitates Krishna consciousness. But the real thing is Krishna consciousness, and that is akarma. And as we've already hinted, it's an ocean of rasa, raso vaisa, labtvanandi bhavati. We become ecstatic by diving deep into that ocean. That ocean Rupa Goswami calls the Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu. And Srimati Radharani is the one in charge of it. So we have to take shelter of her. We do that by taking shelter of her devotees, her representatives. So here the analogy is given, fire. Some years ago, I was in California. I took care of my aging mother until she left this world. And we used to visit the temple in San Diego sometimes. And one gentleman there, very nice Bengali gentleman, very extremely wealthy man, he had a huge mansion in the hills north of San Diego. And that whole west coast of the United States, actually, they suffer from wildfires, natural wildfires, every summer. It's part of the ecology, actually, but it's really out of hand now because of global warming. When we try to make things better, or we try to fix things that aren't broken, this is what happens. It creates problems. And global warming is one of those problems. So now California has to call in the fire departments from 20 states in the western half of the United States every summer just to put out these fires, because they can burn hundreds and thousands of acres, and they do. So one man, one day he was awakened in the middle of the night. He was sleeping peacefully with his head in the lap of Maya. And suddenly he heard this full blast. His whole house reverberated with this Hare Krishna Happening album, Srila Prabhupada chanting. And, oh, whoa, what is this? So he got up to see what the problem was, and he just happened to glance out the window, and the whole sky was orange. And no sooner had he gone to turn off this sound system, which the heat had activated, then his entire house collapsed. He barely made it out the door. He couldn't take anything with him. And then he said the real shock was, that was as if that's not enough. The real shock was that he looked next door and the house was completely untouched. How did it happen? You cannot explain this. There's no reasoning with this thing. If we say that the wind is blowing the fire, okay, but who decides where the wind blows? Karmana Devanetrena. All the agents of the Lord, they decide what's happening where, who's going where, what you did, when you get the fruition, how bad it will be, sweet or sour, poisonous fruit or sweet fruit. All these things are decided way ahead of time. The docket is already written down. If you see an expert Jyotish, you have some idea what's coming. If he's even more expert, you can get some idea of where you've already been. But the real point is, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, you have to act now. You have to decide, what are you going to do now? And of course, that's to surrender to Krishna. So we have to learn this. And really, they say that the saying is that the lessons learned hardest are the lessons learned best. So that's why we have to go through the school of hard knocks. And Maya is the headmistress of that school. She has her Trishula, and she's constantly poking us. The Trishula, each of those points of her Trishula, trident, they represent the Adhibhautik, Adhyatmic, and Adhidaivik kleshas. So sometimes the cause is very clear, at least the instrumental cause, and sometimes it's not clear. So there's a saying in English that fact is stranger than fiction, and anyone who has lived for more than 5 decades in this world, you've probably already experienced that. But even if you haven't lived that long, you're going to experience that however carefully you plan your life, whatever your expectations may be, things are going to come out differently than that. Your plan you have no say in the matter. It's already written. Likhitam apila late pranchitam kaha samartha. Hitopadesh tells us. There's a barcode, an indelible barcode written on everyone's forehead. Only the Devatas can read it, and the Upadevatas. But it's got your whole story there. Or if you go to one of these naughty readers, they in the Sarapoji Maharaj Pandulipi Sangrahalaya, they're supposed to be all these talapatras with everyone's fate written in some sort of grantha code that only they can understand. It's pretty interesting. Once I went to see one of these people, and I gave him the first initial and my thumbprint. And on that basis, he told me how educated I was, my marital status, whether my parents were alive or not, how many siblings I had, what my career was, what kinds of things I've been through in life. Infinite details he already knew about my life. The things that even my mother didn't know, he knew them, just from a thumbprint. So how inconceivable and how subtle are the workings of karma. But they have this science coming from Agastya Muni's grace. Such a person who can design an entire language, and all these things are good. Such a brilliant person, Agastya Muni. Anyway, so this is the complex workings of this material energy, and we're just talking about a few very simple aspects in this Chaturmukha Brahma's Brahmanda. What to speak of when things get really complicated? If you have a 64-headed Brahma or a 1,000-headed Brahma, how infinitely complex is life in those universes? What kind of options are there for you? What kind of consciousness is there? It's beyond us. Thoroughly mind-boggling. Not mind-boggling. It will crash your intelligence. Sometimes your computer gets too much data, or you've got some digital system is overloaded, it just crashes everything. So this is the situation. So why is it important to come to this recognition of the achintya shakti of the Lord? Achintya khalu ye bhavanatan tarkena yojayet. You should not try to apply mundane logic to things that are far beyond it. And even in this world, there are things far beyond our mundane logic. We each have our own. Just as the air carries aromas. Every mind-body complex, every individual kshetra has its own level of sophistication of intelligence and the facility with which to figure out life. And we all have a different picture of life. So and there's a person controlling it, so it's inconceivable to try to understand what his plan is. And we've already mentioned the reason that it's like this is because as soon as we understand Krishna's plan, then we try to take advantage. This is what we do in this world. Two things we do here. What are they? We try to exploit the Lord or his energies. When we're materialists, we try to exploit the Lord's energies directly. That's why everybody worships Amman. So many temples here in Tamil Nadu especially. And when we're pseudo-spiritualists, then we try to exploit the Lord himself. Who are they? The Sahajiyas. So these are the ways that we try to exploit. And then when we can't exploit, or when our exploitation backfires, as we've already described, as it always does, then we try to escape. We try to either we try to run away from the problem, or we throw, more energy into trying to fix the problem, and that usually compounds the suffering and makes things even more complicated than they already are. Or when we get frustrated in that endeavor, then we philosophically try to adjust things. My logic teacher, Dr. Karl Popper, famous Nyayika, he said, he calls this leap philosophy. And the prime example of leap philosophy is Mayavad. Because the Mayavadis just try to say, okay, everything's okay. It's all supposed to be this way. I'm actually God after all, and this is just Leela. And all you have to do really in Mayavad is imagine that you're God, and then you can pretend that your problems are solved, but they're not solved. They're still suffering. Even the so-called liberated Mayavadi will still suffer. What to speak of these pseudo-Mayavadis who aren't even worth that name, actually. So, Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadya navratam anupuvena krishnanushilanam. This is hardcore. Rupa Goswami puts it very plainly. You can't have karma, and that includes dharma. Actually, we've already described. Karma means dharma. Otherwise, it's vikarma. You can't have that. And you can't have jnana either in bhakti. Means you can't try to take shelter of some speculative liberated state or some rationalization that, everything's okay when it isn't. You can't do that. And furthermore, you have to surrender to a person, and you have to do it the way he wants it. You can't do it the way you want to do it. That's why we say, Hare Krishna. You have to take shelter of Srimati Radharani, and it has to be on her terms. It's not just taking shelter of Krishna, it's taking shelter of his devotees, of which she is the foremost. So, Krishnanushilanam means that. It's kind of like, once I was in Hawaii, and I went to the University of Hawaii to see one Sanskrit professor who was very favorable to ISKCON. He used to come to the Sunday feast. So I had some questions about some Upanishadic passages I wanted to ask him. But he wasn't entertaining those questions that day. He was in a different mood. He said, no, just understand this thing first. Karmanyevadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala hetu bhur ma te sangosva karmani. He asked me, what does it mean? When somebody asks you a question like that, especially a professor of Sanskrit, you're very cautious to answer. So I asked him, well, you can explain. He said, to the man on the street, this means you have to work, you have to do your duty. You don't have a choice in life. Sometimes it's said about Hinduism. Hinduism gives you infinite choices about what to believe. And it gives you zero choice about what you're going to do. Just like Bhagavad Gita, many people interpret Bhagavad Gita in many, many different ways. I read so many editions of Bhagavad Gita in English before reading Srila Prabhupada's edition, and I didn't understand them, frankly, I have to admit. And the reason I didn't understand them is because the people who published them also didn't understand them. But everybody agrees on one thing about Bhagavad Gita, that at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is going to fight. That's very clear to everyone. Everybody agrees. So in the same way, we all, whether you're looking at this in terms of Daivi Varnashram Dharma or Suri Varnashram Dharma or even a karma, then you're going to have to do something. So, karmani evadhikara, your only right or your only prerogative is to work. Number one. Number two, ma phaleshu, what is it? Ma phaleshu kadachana. You can't have your paycheck, sir. How are you going to respond to that? You can't, you have to work without pay. In effect, that's what it means. That's a bitter pill to swallow. And, moreover, ma karma phala hetu bhu. You can't even take pride in your work because you're not the one who producing the result. So you can't be proud of what you're doing either. And finally, just when we're ready to escape, he says, ma te sangostva karmani. And you can't not work. So this professor told me, is this not slavery? How are you going to sell this to the man on the street? Nearly impossible. But that's what, and Rupa Goswami is asking for more than that even. At this point in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is only discussing dharma. But Rupa Goswami is taking it far beyond that. You cannot have your dharma, you cannot have your jnana, you cannot have anything except what pleases Srimati Radharani. That you can have. So, therefore we chant, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. When I was in college, I translated one Divyavadana Sutra, Mahayana text. And at the end of that text, the author said, if you actually understand what this text is teaching, you will probably lose control of your bowels on the spot. We have more gross ways of saying that, but I think you understand what it means. So similarly, if we actually knew what Krishna consciousness was, if we actually realized what it entails, most of us would not be here, and that's why we need the holy name of Krishna to chant. We need to chant this holy name to purify our heart of all this infection of karma, infection of akarma, vikarma, infection of jnana, infection of, mukti spriha. What is that? Bhukti mukti spriha yavat pishachi hridi vartate. Krishna, Rupa Goswami says, we're all haunted by this pishachi. Here they worship pishachis, right? So, we're all haunted by these twin pishachi, bhukti and mukti kama. But Krishna bhakta nishkama ataiboshan. Devotee of Krishna he has no program of his own. He's only wholeheartedly adopting Srimati Radharani's program, which means the spiritual master's program. That's what we have to adopt wholeheartedly, unreservedly, unconditionally, and totally. There's no way to do that. Most people who adopt Krishna consciousness, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, fail. What are the stats? Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye. Okay, we're all trying. But yatatamapi siddhanam kashchiman veti tatvata. How many times does Krishna say tatvata in Bhagavad Gita? In what contexts does he use this word? To understand him in fact, well, that's a little difficult because we don't want it. Frankly speaking, this is the real fact. We really don't want it. And most people, when they figure out, maybe after 10 years, maybe after 20 years, that what Krishna consciousness, what is the practical ramification of these simple words, jnana karmadi and apratam anukuliyena krishnanushilanam, then they leave. Because yatatamapi sittanam kaschin mam vedi tatvata. This is the nature of material entanglement. How powerful is this Maya? Even if you can tolerate being poked by these three prongs, and obviously we can because we're here. We don't die immediately. We can tolerate that. But this thing is very difficult. This subtlety of Maya and the sheer force of Maya is something that should scare us. And especially when we consider the ramifications of verses like this one today, that the workings of Maya are inconceivable to us. So there's no way you're going to figure out what is going on here. There was one of my professors in college, a fellow graduate student, told me, he's so intelligent, it's scary. So Krishna is also like that. And when we know this, Krishna says, throughout Bhagavad Gita, he repeats it several times, when we actually know who he is and what his nature is and what we're dealing with here when we're approaching Krishna, then we can surrender. We can actually make a mature commitment to Krishna consciousness. This is what it means when we say, Te dvandva moha nirmukta bhajante mam dhrutavrtaha. And this is why karma or dharma is very important. Because it's what produces the adhikar for enough gyan to recognize the nature of the material. Sambandha gyan. Sambandha gyan, without sambandha gyan, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, we can only offend the holy name. If we want to chant without offense, we have to have sambandha gyan. And that's why we have to read Prabhupada's books every day. How much every day? I just heard a lecture. He said, 2 hours every day, that is austerity. So maybe not 2 hours, because who can do that? The only book we read in 2023 is Facebook. But at least every day read an hour is ideal. Half an hour, okay? Kuch hona chahiye. At least you have to read something. So that's to come to this stage of recognizing just what this process is that we're engaged in. Because that forces us to question, what am I really here for? What do I really want? Why am I doing this? And when we get the answers to these questions, sometimes it's not so comfortable. So the holy name is absolutely required, because without this grace that comes through chanting humbly, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, we will not be able to handle the revelation that our intelligence is capable of. What to speak of revelations that are far beyond our intelligence. So in the Kali Yuga, Hare Nama, Aiva Kevalam, Kalau Nasti Eva Gatiranyatha. It's the only thing that really works in Kali Yuga. And even then we have to do it carefully. We heard from Bhishma Dev in the first canto, Nat hyasya karhichid rajan puman veda vidhitsitam ayad vijignasa ya yukta muhyanti kavayopihi. Means no one can know the plan of the Lord Shri Krishna. Even the great philosophers inquire exhaustively, they're bewildered. And Srila Prabhupada has written a very nice purport there that no one can understand. Even here it says, Prabhupada writes, the bewilderment of Maharaj Yudhishthira over his past sinful acts and the resultant sufferings, etc., is completely negated by the great authority Bhishma, one of the 12 authorized persons. Bhishma wanted to impress upon Maharaj Yudhishthira that since time immemorial, no one, including such demigods as Shiva and Brahma, could ascertain the real plan of the Lord. So what can we understand about it? It's useless to inquire about it. Even the exhaustive philosophical inquiries of sages cannot ascertain the plan of the Lord. The best policy is to simply abide by the orders of the Lord without argument. This is the point. And this is also why we need to chant the holy name, because only the holy name can bring us to that state of surrender. We accept without arguing. We submit without conditions. Like the verses are written here very nicely. Ashlishyava paradatam panashkumam adarshanat maramahatam karotuva. Adarshanat maramahatam karotuva. That, my dear Lord, Srimati Radharani says, you can embrace me if you like. That's what I would like. Or you can kill the thing that is the most cherished thing within my heart. You can kill it. Hata means dead, killed, slain. You're completely free to do anything and everything. Her friends came to her after Krishna had already gone away, and everybody was convinced, except for Srimati Radharani, that he's not coming back. So they all surrounded her one day and said, look at yourself. What are you doing to yourself? You should forget about him. He's not coming back. How can we can't see you like this, and how must you feel? This is very beautifully described in Padyavali, towards the end of Padyavali, and commentary on that word. So you should just forget about Krishna. You should go on with life. You have to move on, sometimes we say in this world. So Srimati Radharani's answer with this verse. Yes, I know. He's Lamparta. You have this word in Tamil? Lamparta? It's a very bad word. Very bad word. But this, she says, she admits, yes, I know he's like this. Still, he is my only Lord, Prananatha. He's the only Lord of my life. It cannot be otherwise. So, do not give him up. This is why we worship her. And this is why we worship those who appreciate and surrender unto her. This is our line. Gopi Ramya Kachru Upasana Brajavadhu Vargena Yakalpita. So, these are just a few ramblings on these things from Srila Prabhupada's books. The principle is there very clearly. We cannot understand fate. Yudhishthira Maharaj, he was afraid that the whole Kurukshetra, he was calculating, speculating actually. At least he was giving that example that maybe because of my greed for the kingdom, all these people have been killed, so what's going to happen to me? How sinful am I? Etc., etc. But Bhishma Dev said, even if it's not Krishna Leela, the fact is that there's an adrishta which is always operating in our lives, and we can't understand things. Sometimes we don't have to beat ourselves up about things that happen to us, or even things that we do. But we do have to abide by the Shastra, and we do have to keep moving on. Regardless, it's like Srila Prabhupada said, you just chant these 16 rounds, avoiding the offenses, and follow these 4 regulative principles, and you will go back to Godhead. But as we've described already, Manusyanam Sahasreshu, some people take it, they chant 14, 12 rounds a day. Some people chanting less than that. Some people stop chanting their rounds. Some people are overwhelmed and cannot chant their rounds. Sometimes it happens. Or they break the regulative principles, or they give up Krishna consciousness altogether. It happens. But if we just, even if you fall, and even if you become discouraged by whatever life throws at you, whatever this adrishta, achintya, shakti has in store for you, and it's always unexpected, that you just keep moving ahead with your tightly clasping the lotus feet of the spiritual master. You will go back to Godhead because he will take you back to God. That is why we call him his divine grace, Krishna Kripa Sri Murti. So we'll stop here. If anybody has any questions or any comments about this, we can discuss.
Just a comment. You said that after 10 years or whatever, and devotees get to understand what this philosophy actually means and go away. Better if they go away than if they stay and adjust the philosophy.
I was going to mention that. Yeah.
Anyabhilashita yuktam. Jnanakamadi avritam. Pratikulyena. Change the philosophy.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I was going to mention this is another. It's Mayavad actually. It's the same logic that motivates the Mayavadis. The Mayavadis, they can't fix the situation. They can't have what they want, and so they try to redefine things and pretend that they're in ecstasy and that they're God, or they try to convince others. This is Mayavad, and that tendency can seep into Krishna consciousness also because, well, especially if we allow it in by not bolting the door to that kind of thing or that kind of association, then it's certainly going to come in and it certainly will infect us. And then what happens? Then we say, well, times have changed, and Kali Yuga. It's like maybe nowadays for preaching we call it a preaching strategy or something, but we changed the philosophy. Don't do that. Don't do that. Or we change the books. That's another favorite. Don't like what the Bhagavatam says? No problem. Just change it. Call it editing. Yeah, this is a dangerous mentality. It's a cheating mentality. It's called, in 7th canto, chala dharma. Out and out cheating. Or, we can say, there's 5 of them, right? There's upadharma, chala dharma, dharma bhasa, I don't remember the other 2. Maybe somebody knows. Paradharma, certainly that's a big one. Paradharma, that's a really popular one right now. Maharaj was speaking on this point. To try and do somebody else's duty. You have your own duty to do. Apane kama karo. This is Madhvacharya says it in his Dvadasha Stotra very clearly. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says it in his Bengali songs. Srila Prabhupada says it throughout his books. He's got to accept it. He's have to surrender. You can't twist and twangle the philosophy around and expect that you're going to get the same result. You'll end up miserable, frustrated, because that's all that happens when you evade Krishna or try to exploit Krishna or defy Krishna. That's what happens. You can only suffer. So therefore Maya is there with the Trishula. School of Hard Knocks is there because, what does Krishna say? This is his Yatecha Sita Thakuru. The end of the Gita. He tells Arjuna that, I'm giving you a choice because you're my beloved, you're very dear to me. I'm giving you this choice. You can surrender to me and we can enjoy eternal reciprocation in pure love forever. No more interruptions like death. No more. Or if you don't have to do that if you don't want to. It's your choice. But you should understand very clearly that if you decide to go that route, the mundane route, then I'm going to have to turn you over to Maya. And she's going to beat the daylights out of you until you figure it out. That's how it works. It's called tough love. It's real love. Parents, and many parents are here, so you all know, especially if you have young children. What happens if you don't discipline those children? Then no parent in the world, practically speaking, well, at least not in ISKCON, I hope, would think of raising children without discipline. You have to discipline them, otherwise they grow up to be retarded. And they become the kind of people who are now running the world. Every other day now in the United States, somebody goes into a public place with a handgun and just starts shooting madly. 10 people killed. Every other day this happens now. They've gone completely berserk from over sinful sense gratification. It just doesn't work. And, this polarizes things. People have to figure out that, either maybe I have to become a hardcore atheist and just go all the way and see what happens, or I have to find an alternative and maybe surrender to God. America is being polarized, I hope, in this way. But they've kind of given the keys to China, so it's hard to say. Yeah, I'm just kind of rambling off of your point, but yeah, that's very dangerous. Don't be over-intelligent, or as Prabhupada said, he called this the American disease. The American disease is you don't like what you hear, just change it. It's an offshoot of this. In this case, when it comes to the philosophy, this American disease manifests in the form of tweaking the philosophy and turning it slightly into something other than what was intended. Tatparya means what is intended by Vyas, what is intended by the Acharya, what Prabhupada intended. How do you understand that? Sometimes it's not clear. Shruti pratyaksham aitihyam anumana chatushrayam. So we have, if your Shruti is not clear, then you have your Anuman. If your Anuman is not clear, then the Pratyaksha is there. If it's still not clear, Aitiham is there. You do what your forefathers did, Manu says. Do whatever your forefathers did with the understanding that it was Dharma, and you will never go down. You may or may not go up, but at least you'll stay where you are. Just like recently I changed my Ayurvedic doctor. I have thyroid problems. So, it's not worse than it was before. Not a great deal of improvement, but at least there's no degradation. So this is what happens when we do our karma. But karma alone will only give you, what is that verse? Pariksha lokan karma chadan brahmano nirvedamayanyastyakrat akrita kritena. A Brahminical person surveys all options in life, and he concludes that, wait a minute, there's nothing here but karma. What is the use of adding karma to karma or subtracting karma from karma? It's still just karma. So what does he do then? Tad vijnanartham evam gurum evabhigachet samitpani shrotriyam brahmanishtam. Then you have to approach somebody who is brahmanishtam, somebody who's shrotriyam, really heard and understood. You have to submit to that person. That's what we don't want to do. You have to submit to that person and inquire from that person about what is absolutely true beyond all this stuff that's been created and destroyed. Karmas will keep you pious, and that will keep you ripe for Krishna consciousness. But it's not everything. You have to move on. You have to transcend into the realm of Jnana and beyond the realm of Jnana, into Param Jnana, Karmam Chidivyam, Tattvata, as Krishna says in chapter 6. Any other questions? So then, thank you all very much for listening patiently. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.